John Paul II said, the future of the world and the church passed by way of the family. And he went on to go to say that the family has been placed at the heart of the great struggle between good and evil, between life and death, and between love and all that's opposed to love. And another way of saying that is Satan's first attack is against you and your family. And John Paul will go further and say that the original sin entered human history through the union of man and woman. Satan didn't just attack the woman, and she didn't just attack the man, she attacked that union. Today, Satan is attacking the minds and the hearts of men and of our entire family, and his success today is astounding. For the first time since the church became the dominant structure and the dominant influence in all of Western society, for the first time ever, in the United States today, the majority of households do not include a married man and woman. Marriage is a minority structure in the United States today. Furthermore, for the first time in our country's history, the majority of children under the age of 18 will go to bed tonight in a home that does not include their biological father and mother. So the attack is very real, and it's not getting easier. It's getting more intense. They did a survey of young people and said, what do you want in life? These young people said they wanted everything that you would imagine. They want to, actually number one on the list surprised me. They want to work out and stay in shape. Then it got into, I want a great job. I want to make boatloads of money. I want to travel the whole world. I want to have a house bigger than Tiger Woods. I want to do everything in the world that I can do. And at the very bottom of the list, the last two things, only 17% identified, I want to get married as a top 3 goal, not number one, as a top 3 goal in life. The only thing that was lower than that on the survey was have kids. Only 13% identified that they wanted to have children. Once again, not as number one, but as a top 3 goal in life. The survey didn't bother asking anything about faith because they just assumed that these young people didn't have faith as a top goal in life. And in fact, that's the only thing that was lower than get married and have kids. Is only 12.7% of non-married Catholic millennials, 18 to 35, go to church on a weekly basis. And I want us to think about that for a second. If you were to take my faith and my family from me, I would cease to exist as the person I am. And what we got is a whole generation that is growing up that don't have that as the foundation of their life. And yes, what that ends up being is that ends up being a very dark existence. So yes, it's not surprising that we've got a host of people who have all sorts of emotional issues. And one of the most shocking stats I've seen is you put that as the soup that we've been kind of swimming in, that's getting ever more intense, and then you add COVID on top of it. The CDC did a study about 6 months ago, and believe it or not, 25%, 1/4 of young people said they had seriously considered suicide since COVID had started. Who's ever heard of a culture where 1/4 of the people in the culture say, I've seriously considered suicide? So we need to be honest with ourselves that this battle that we're facing today is not a little battle. It's not just like, things are a little tough. And no. This is a battle where now what you and I would define as normal, and what the church defines as normal. Boy see girl, boy thinks girl's cute, boy gets married to girl, they have their kids, they raise their kids, they start it all over again. That is not the normal experience of the majority of our culture, and that's having incredible consequences for those of us today as well as the future. So that's the reality of the battle that we're in. And what we need to be very focused on as men is not just being able to name the battle, which we've got to do. The second thing is we got to bring a solution. We can't just go to our kids and say, boom, boom, boom. You got to get this right. We got to go to them and we got to say, okay, there's a solution. And yes, you mentioned it, in our book, Choice Wine, 7 Steps to a Superabundant Marriage. We go through 7 steps. That in those 7 steps, they come straight from the Holy Family. if we lived the life that the Holy Family lived, and let's think about that life for a moment. It wasn't like the Holy Family was born into some type of paradise. They weren't. The Holy Family existed in a world that looks a whole lot like our world. First of all, the Roman Empire had conquered Israel. So they were living in the midst of a pagan influence that infiltrated every area of their life. Within, quote, the church, meaning within Judaism and temple, they had these incredible factions that were fighting like crazy, and things were pretty much a mess. Well, if you look at our culture, that's exactly what we're dealing with, an external power that is really this whole, what John Paul called a culture of death, that relates to the media and all the institutions and everything else we've talked about. But at the same time, we have certainly difficulties with the church today. And it's precisely within that milieu that the Holy Family existed as the greatest realization that this earth has ever seen of the love of God. You know, it's funny. My accountant, whom I love, is a wonderful Christian woman, says that, you know, in every age, there's been people who are happy and people who are unhappy. You have to make that choice about what your life is going to be, and then you need to take the steps to make that a reality. So we can't sit here and say, you know, if only the culture was different. Well, it wasn't different for St. Joseph and Our Lady. They chose that in that culture, they would live a life united to God and be holy. We need to choose that in this culture, we will choose a life and be holy. And if we do that, that will change us, and it will lay the foundation to change the culture. So if you look at that, the Holy Family was this incredible intersection of Judaism and Christianity. They were the fulfillment of the Mosaic Law and the first Christian Catholic family. So if you go through and you look at that Holy Family, the first thing God did was, in the context of Judaism, he identified the three things you got to get right. And it ends up being, if you don't get the spousal relationship right, if you don't get money right, and you don't get God right, it isn't going to work. At the end of the day, that's what you got to get right. Your spousal relationship, your use of money, which relates to the dinner table, and then finally, your relationship with God. You get those three things right, and it's going to go well. Once you get those things right, if you'll set your mind on the things above, you'll find out that God is present in your midst, which was the mystery of the Holy Family. Jesus Christ, God incarnate, was present in their midst each and every day. St. Joseph and Our Lady could wake up and literally walk over and say, "Good morning, God." God is present in yourself. He's present in your family members. And if you'll practice superabundant mercy, you'll find it. Those are the 7 steps. Get your spousal relationship right. Get your money right. Get your time with God right. Set your mind on the things above, which is the big picture that Chris was talking about. And that big picture is God is present in your home, in yourself, in your family members, and you practice superabundant mercy, because we're in a fallen world and we're going to have to keep starting over and over all the time. You get those things right, and even in the midst of this world, you can have a holy, healthy, happy family. And who doesn't want that? That's the beautiful thing about Christianity. We can take a message that says we have a pathway for you to have happiness, for you to have holiness, for you to have health, and believe it or not, even wealth is on the side of all of this. I want to show you, if we just take those first 3 steps, and we take 5 factors out of those first 3 steps, saying you got to get your spousal relationship right, you got to get your money right, and you got to get your relationship with God right. If we take 5 factors out of those first 3 steps and see what that would do to the divorce rate in America. Here's a little graphic. And if you look at this, this is now those 5 factors. In the United States, 40% of all marriages, first marriages, end in divorce. This is data taken out of the General Social Survey, which is a secular database, one of the largest sociological public access databases in the United States. And in that database, 28.2% of people had been divorced at least once in their life. The reason that's below 40 is this includes people who were married only a year or 2. Unfortunately, some of those marriages would continue on, so that we know that 40% end in divorce. When you go through and you start adding factors out of those 5 steps, look what happens to the divorce rate. First thing we said is you need to get your spousal relationship right, which we say honor your wedding vows. Within that context, we say you got to do 2 things. Don't cohabitate before you get married. Once you get married, never cheat on your spouse. You do those 2 things, and the divorce rate already goes down to 11%. I'm going to skip over money for a second because in the general social survey, there wasn't anything that fit in really easily. The next thing is you got to get God right. The foundation for that should be you should go to church every week and you should pray every day. Add those 2 things to the previous 2 things, and that takes it down to 5.9%. The next thing we said you got to do is set your mind on the things above, which ideally should be faith and reason are 2 wings upon which the human spirit rises to the contemplation of God, Pope John Paul II, if he has that ratio. And they didn't have anything in the general social survey that we would talk about scripture or the 3 wisdoms or anything that for us would be critical. They didn't have a college degree, secular knowledge. You add that to the 4 previous things, and believe it or not, in the general social survey, there was not one person who had done those 5 things. They didn't cohabitate before they got married. Once they got married, they never cheated. They went to church every Sunday. They prayed every day, and they had a college degree. There wasn't one person who had been divorced. Furthermore, 100% who were married, 100% were happily married. 4 out of 5 were very happily married. 1 out of 5 were happily married, and not one person said they were unhappily married. Now, I had a major sociologist call me on this and say, well, Steve, it's not 0. And I said, of course, it's not perfectly 0. And in all my talks, one time I've had one man walk up to me and said, it didn't work for me. And I said, I am really sorry. But that sociologist said, Steve, there's no question it's less than 5%. These things are truly additive. Imagine what would happen in our culture if we get people to do this. Now, what percentage, first of all, how many of these 5 things are in your personal control? All 5 of them. How many of these are heroic virtue? None of them, right? There's not one of these things. I'm not asking you to, go to Africa and give your life as a missionary. I'm asking you, would you take some time to pray today? That is not heroic virtue, folks. What percent of Americans do these 5 things? When the survey was done, 1.2. If you look at the next generation, it's more like 0.5%. Now do we know why we've got so much trouble in our culture today? If we can do 5 simple things that are not heroic virtue, that would radically, and I mean radically change the divorce rate, and we're not doing what's simple, that's in our personal control. And when you look at it, yes, absolutely. I appreciate, Matt, a minute ago you said, the media. Absolutely, if you look at all the data of all the studies, going back to media before we even had social media, and then social media has just ramped it up, the media fundamentally changes your views on God and on the family. That's so true. We've got 100,000 men going through that man as you. And we've had them do surveys about all sorts of things. When we've looked at, the number one determinant of the state of their spiritual life? How much media they consume. That was more important than how many times a week they went to church. It was more important than how frequently they went to confession. The number one determinant about the spiritual state of a man's life, spiritual life, was how much media he consumed. And it's this simple, folks. This is not rocket science. The average youth today consumes 10 hours of media a day. 10 hours. And let's think about that for a moment. I'm supposed to sleep 8. I'm supposed to go to school for at least 6. I add 10, that's 24. Oh, I didn't have time to eat or shower or work out, or how about talk to my family? The average father spends less than 10 minutes a day in conversation with his children. What's happened is the media, in addition to presenting all of these messages that are not the messages we need to reinforce faith and family, they have also squeezed out time for anything else. They have literally squeezed out the time for what brings us true happiness, which is God and relationship. And the first relationship is family. Indeed, when we called this book 7 Steps to a Superabundant Marriage, we started where most people live their lives. And that is, everybody wants to be happy, healthy, and wealthy. If you want to do that, the data shows get married and go to church. And in fact, the true antidote to all of this is your relationship with God, which we heard Bishop talk about when we first started. In fact, when the social scientists went through and they said, okay, well, how is it that we can try and change the factors that lead to divorce? The one thing that changed all the other negative factors was how frequently you went to church and prayed, your relationship with God. That's what gives you the strength you need to not do pornography, to not cheat on your wife, to not make your life about money so that it's an idol for you. But to find that time for God is to make sure that what you do is you've got to recreate time. You've got to recreate time by taking out what is squeezing out the rest of the time in your life. You've got to take out the media as the very first thing. So it's funny, when I talk to men today, the first thing I tell them to do, if you want to change your life, is change your media habits. That's the very first thing I say. And I say that as a guy who spends all sorts of time and money creating media things. So when I say change your media habits, the first thing is replace, the quote, normal media with something that's actually going to build up your life. Heroic Men offers lots of opportunities for that. Obviously, the other speakers here, there's all sorts of people bringing out good stuff for you today that can build up your life. This is a fantastic time in the life of the church. I can tell you, in my lifetime, there's never been so much great content available to strengthen your spiritual life. It's there. Get it, make use of it for yourself and for your families. Then the next thing I'd say is, don't only put prayer time into your own personal life, put prayer time into your family life. There's 2 things that God gave the Jews to do that foundation for the Holy Family, to bring God into the family and to gather the family together. The first thing was the dinner table, and the next thing was the Sabbath rest. If you take that dinner table and you truly decide to get together with your family at the dinner table, that changes almost every measure of family life and your children's life. To get together, and when you get together, by the way, when I say get together at the family table, I'm not talking about, 4 people with their heads down eating and doing their own personal media. It's a media-free zone. We don't bring any media to our table whatsoever. And we don't have any, television on the background, anything else. It is our time to talk as a family together. You do that and you'll figure out what's going on in your kid's life, and you can just start to build that relationship with them. And then the next thing is pray together, including at the dinner table. If you've got God as just a part of your normal spiritual life, it's amazing how quickly and easily what's going on in your spiritual life is just part of normal dinner conversations. If we take the natural things God has given us, it can truly make a huge difference. Chris just said that it's the little things, the basic things that make a huge thing. That's God's ways. God's ways have always been to do simple things, but the right things, and it has profound implications. You look at the family, boy meets girl, they fall in love, they get married, they have kids, they raise those kids so those kids repeat the process. That's the foundation for all society. You want that marriage to be successful? I gave you 5 simple factors. You do those things, and it begins by making your life and your family's life better. And then, as John Paul said, the future of the world and the church pass by way of the family. And that'll be the way to transform this world. God bless you.